Hello and welcome back to my Lonely Short Story Month, where I'm reading the short stories of Anthony Trollope contained in An Editor's Tale, or Mary Greasley and the Editor's Tale, which are stories that seem to have been published all around sort of 1869, 1870, and then collected into this book. At least so far, that's the general time period of the thing. Today I am doing the Pnjmdrm, which is the name of a magazine that our editor, who at this point is not an editor but is using the we because it's a committee of aspiring literary folk who want to get together and make a magazine. And this story is divided into two sections: hope and then despair, which maybe tells you what the fate of the magazine is going to be. Spoilers ahead. So yes, in Hope, we kind of get introduced to the committee of people, the editor, who has got kind of literary aspirations, and various people. There's basically they've gotten money, which is the big thing. X has given them money, and now they've collected together to do this. They have one guy who's more of kind of like a jobbing journalist. He doesn't really come up too much in the story. They have one fellow who is very much, I'm going to discourse on weighty philosophical manners. They have a woman who gets two votes on the committee for some reason, because she's providing the meeting place, and is going to contribute stuff, and is also very beholden to her cousin, who is the kind of weighty philosophical guy. It's in some ways it's a kind of an object lesson in magazine putting together magazines, then and I think now. It's maybe heartening, just like you get that many people together with many conflicting interests, and if there's nobody who's particularly dominant, it becomes a hodgepodge. It becomes a conflicting thing of, I want to do this, no, I want to do that, or and tugging back and forth, and nothing particularly gets done. However, in the first part, the editor still has hope. He has hope that, we're going to get this together. And then in despair, he's like, okay, I'm going to sit down. They voted, because this is kind of, I guess, this was told in a time previous to when having fiction in your magazine was de rigueur. I mean, you have Trollope himself, or you have Dickens, or you have many, many other novelists who serialized their fictional works in magazines, and that what sold magazines. This seems to be prior to that point. So all of his compatriots are like, no, we don't want nonfiction. We don't want fiction in our magazine. That's just like, they can consider that lowly, and don't want it there. And the editor's like, oh, okay, no, I can't serialize a big novel in this thing. It's like, okay, fine, I'll go away, and I'll try and write something on the vote. Maybe I'll try and write something on the vote. And indeed, in despair, he's trying. I can't. He tries, and it's like nothing's coming. And it's like, when I have plenty of opinions, but nothing that particularly I don't think the public is going to want to hear. And in this section, we get sort of a little insight into, I can guess that this is maybe just slightly, with a slight little bit of self-mockery, is Trollope going like, oh, this is how I get ideas of he'd come up with one story, but then he's walking through a park and he overhears just a little snatch of a conversation of a little girl saying, oh, I can't wait to meet him. I can't wait to meet him. And he kind of conjures up this whole story, which sounds a bit on the sappy side, to be honest, a little maudlin, maybe a little Dickensian, of just like, oh, the little girl who's just so happy to see her father or brother. And it's like, oh, and he kind of imagines a whole kind of history out of that. And it's like, he writes the entire story, and he's got the story. And it's like, okay, wow, I'm really fired up. It's like, okay, it's just a short story, though. It's not like a big novel, so I'm sure that once I've read it to the people in my thing, and he's got big hopes, he's gonna hear what everyone else has to say and really encourage them and listen to everything, even if they have really long, interminable philosophical treatises. And so he gets there, and they have their meeting, and when it comes to his turn, he gets immediately shut down. Like, no, we didn't want fiction. We just said serialized fiction. It's like, no, we don't want it. And they have a vote on it. Initially it's like, it's okay, and the woman who's the kind of the hostess, and that it's like, oh, it's okay. And she's written a long thing on Barclay. I think it's Bishop Barclay or something like that. And it's like, And she initially is like, oh yeah, I guess it's okay if it's a short story. But her cousin, who is like, no, we're just doing weighty philosophical stuff. It's like, no, we're not doing that. And she's like, oh, okay. And her 2 votes decide the matter, and he is squashed. And indeed, that really basically, the rest of the meeting, he just like, I was squashed. I like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I don't care about this. And indeed, so they skip over him because he doesn't even get to read this work. I think it's called The Inmate, the story that was exciting him so much. They skip over him, and it goes to the lady authoress again. This is a theme with Trllp, and she has an interminably long and boring tract on I think it on a kind of religious matter. I can't even remember what it is now. Just that it's a drone and a drone and a drone until finally her cousin stands up and says, no. She actually gets through it. He says, "This is all drivel." It's just like, "What do you think of it?" Because that's the only opinion she actually cares about. "What do you think of it?" He says, "It's drivel." And he takes it from her and he throws it in the fire and it burns it. And that does away with the Pnjmdrm. It just doesn't. It's a wet squib. It does not take off at all. They don't even get one issue out. It's just like complete thing. Trllp's editor is sure to mention, like, oh well, I did get to put it into another magazine, which I'm sure it was just starting out, and I'm sure it contributed to its further success as it is now. And then, yes, that most of his compatriots never went on to do anything. The big, weighty philosophical guy went off to fight kind of for Polish rights and died in a Russian prison. Never heard of the women again. And there's the jobbing reporter guy who's like, yeah, he works, and Trllp works. But it was sort of one of these. And so he told the backer, it's like, oh, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's like, well, that's the problem. You guys, you don't know what you want to do. You just want greatness. And that did seem to be maybe some of his compatriots, a good fair summation of some of his compatriots, even if that wasn't him. There's the individuals. The individuals had very firm ideas, but some of them were probably more wrong-headed than others, or not going to be palatable to a reading public. But so it's a little inside baseball on just kind of the publishing industry of the time, and maybe just kind of one of those stories that makes you smile. It's not like a substantial story, but it's a story that makes you smile because I can totally see this kind of a group coming together now to build a website or something like that, or they've got financial backing, and now they're all having to kind of argue about, like, what's going to happen, how are we going to make this together. I don't know if it's like, sometimes you can see why some little kind of magazine has a tyrant at the top who, if even if they're not right, at least they have one particular point of view, and people know what they're going to get when they come to that magazine. I think it's someone like John W. Campbell, who really in science fiction realm in the 50s had a very definite idea of exactly what kind of story he wanted and how he was going to do it, and shaped writers to that market, and had some sort of a sense of what was going to sell. And I mean, Anthony Trllp himself was an editor of a magazine for a while, a starting magazine, but he did give it up because he said he didn't really have that. He didn't have the right proper editor's sense of what was going to sell, even if he was someone who was a very successful as a writer himself. He maybe wasn't the kind of mind that was going to be able to put together other people's writings and go, oh, this will pair all this together and this will sell. This will be financially successful. So yeah, that was Pnjmdrm. Probably a fairly slight story. Kind of still again on it's always interesting when females come up in kind of a working environment for Trllp, a working writing environment for Trllp, of exactly how ambivalent those are. I mean, this is a whole group of people where there's a bunch of people there that probably had no business trying to write popular stuff for the public, but it's interesting that, how yet again how female authoress I think at the time, but author would be was treated got treated by Trllp, or handled. So yeah, That's the Pnjmdrm by Anthony Trllp. More videos later.